She thought she was going for a family meeting. But she walked into a room full of secrets. A husband who betrayed her. A family that planned it behind her back. A decision already made without her voice. They expected her to cry. They expected her to beg. Instead, she said one thing that froze the room and walked out with a secret of her own. What happened after that? No one in that house ever recovered. Before we begin, please take a moment to like this video, share it, and subscribe to this channel. Your support helps this channel grow. Now let's begin. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind of afternoon that carried a strange stillness, as though the air itself was holding its breath. Elelliana Stanley was seated on the cream-colored sectional sofa in the living room of their Elelliana apartment, her feet tucked beneath her, a silk throw blanket loosely draped over her legs. The room smelled faintly of lavender from the diffuser she had switched on earlier, hoping it would calm the persistent nausea that had clung to her for days. She had not been feeling herself lately. Her body felt heavier, slower, like it was moving through water. Her head throbbed softly, and there was a dull ache in her lower back that refused to leave. She had blamed stress, work, maybe the Lagos heat. Anything but fear. From across the room, her husband's phone rang. Stanley glanced at the screen, and something shifted in his posture. It was subtle, the way his shoulders tightened, the way his jaw clenched for half a second before he stood up and walked toward the balcony. Elelliana noticed. She always noticed things like that. Years of marriage had trained her eyes to read him even when he said nothing. She listened as he spoke in hushed tones, his back turned, his voice low and controlled. She could hear the faint murmur of his mother's voice through the speaker, sharp and insistent even from a distance. The conversation did not last long. When he returned inside, his face had taken on that familiar expression he wore whenever his family was involved. A mixture of obligation and irritation. "There is an urgent family meeting at my parents' house this evening," he said, already reaching for his car keys. Elelliana frowned. Today? She adjusted her position on the sofa, swallowing hard as a wave of dizziness washed over her. She told him she was not feeling well. She explained that she had been battling fatigue all day, that her body felt off. She asked him, gently, to attend the meeting without her. Stanley did not sit down. He did not soften his voice. Instead, he insisted. His family expected both of them. It would look disrespectful if she did not come. His mother had specifically asked for her presence. Elelliana hesitated. Something about the urgency unsettled her. Family meetings in the Stanley household were never spontaneous. They were planned, calculated, often layered with hidden meanings. She had learned that early in her marriage. But she was too tired to argue, too drained to resist the weight of expectation pressing down on her. Fine, she finally agreed, even though her instincts screamed otherwise. As she stood up to change, she felt it again. That sharp flutter in her chest. The quiet voice in her head whispered that this evening would change everything. The drive to Ikoyi was unusually quiet. The city buzzed around them as usual. Car horns blared in the distance, street vendors wove between vehicles selling bottled water and plantain chips, and the sky was painted in the muted gold of an approaching sunset. Inside the SUV, however, there was a cold stillness that made Elelliana's skin prickle. Stanley focused on the road, his hands steady on the steering wheel, his eyes fixed ahead. No music played. No casual conversation filled the space between them. It was as though an invisible wall had been erected inside the car, separating them. Elelliana shifted in her seat, adjusting the seatbelt that suddenly felt too tight across her chest. She glanced at her husband, studying his profile. The familiar curve of his jaw, the faint crease between his brows. He looked tense, guarded. That was when it struck her. She had never asked why they were going. The realization came like a slow, creeping chill. In all the confusion of the moment, in her discomfort and reluctance, she had missed the most important question. What was this meeting really about? She cleared her throat, her voice barely above a whisper. She asked him then, carefully, what the meeting was about. Stanley did not look at her. His eyes remained glued to the road ahead as he responded that she would understand when they got inside. That answer did nothing to ease her nerves. If anything, it made them worse. Her fingers tightened around the strap of her handbag. She stared out the window, watching the familiar streets blur past, her reflection faintly visible in the tinted glass. Her own eyes looked distant, clouded with unease. By the time the tall iron gates of the Stanley family compound came into view, her heart was pounding so loudly she was certain Stanley could hear it. The Stanley mansion stood just as it always had. Grand. Imposing. A symbol of wealth built on years of family legacy and rigid tradition. The compound was brightly lit, more so than usual, casting sharp shadows against the pristine white walls. Several cars were parked in the driveway, far more than Elelliana had expected. That was the first sign that something was wrong. As they stepped inside, the house buzzed with a low hum of voices. Familiar faces turned toward them. Brothers, aunties, uncles, even distant relatives she had only met once or twice before. Some had traveled from the city, others from far away. Everyone was already seated, arranged carefully around the expansive living room like an audience waiting for a performance. Elelliana's chest tightened. They greeted the elders respectfully, kneeling and bowing where tradition demanded. Polite responses followed, but the warmth was missing. Smiles did not quite reach the eyes. Conversations died the moment she and Stanley took their seats. She felt like an outsider in a room she had been part of for years. Moments later, the eldest man in the room, Chief Bamadil Albert, Stanley's father's elder brother, cleared his throat. The room fell silent instantly. His presence commanded attention without effort. He was a man known for his wisdom, his words often carrying the weight of finality. He began to speak slowly, deliberately, weaving his sentences with proverbs and riddles. He spoke of life's imperfections, of how no one walked through life without making mistakes. He spoke of circumstances beyond human control, of choices made in difficult moments. Elelliana listened, confused. Her mind struggled to follow the direction of his speech. His words floated around the room like smoke, vague and unsettling. Then he turned to face her. He addressed her gently, calling her his daughter. He warned her that what he was about to say would hurt deeply, but that she must be strong. In that moment, Elelliana felt her stomach drop. Her palms grew clammy. Her breath hitched in her throat. 1,000 terrible possibilities raced through her mind, none of them preparing her for what came next. The words that followed sliced through the room with cruel precision. Chief Bamadil revealed that Stanley had a child with another woman. The sentence hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. A son. 5 months old. Elelliana's ears rang as though she had been struck. She stared at the elder, her mind struggling to process the information. She turned instinctively toward her husband, searching his face for denial, for confusion, for anything that suggested this was a misunderstanding. But Stanley's face had gone pale. His eyes were fixed on the floor. The elder continued, explaining that the woman was very sick and had no one else to care for her or the baby. It had been decided that she and the child would move. It pressed against Elelliana's chest, making it difficult to breathe. Angel. That was the name that had been carefully hidden from her for months, wrapped in secrecy and justification. Angel, already his wife. Angel, whose bride price had been paid while Elelliana still slept beside Stanley every night, believing her marriage was intact. She looked around the room slowly, deliberately. The faces staring back at her did not look guilty. They looked resolved. As though this decision had been discussed, debated, and finalized long before she was invited to hear about it. She realized then that this gathering was never about informing her. It was about presenting a finished arrangement and expecting her to fall in line. Her mother-in-law continued speaking, her tone smooth and practiced. She spoke of how they had considered Elelliana's feelings, how they had waited for the right time, how they did not want to burden her while she was already struggling emotionally. Each word sounded considerate on the surface, yet each one carried an undercurrent of blame. Elelliana's inability to give them another child was mentioned again, gently this time, but firmly enough to sting. It was framed as a misfortune, a limitation, something beyond anyone's control. And yet, The solution they had chosen was presented as logical, even necessary. A second wife was not betrayal, they implied. It was tradition. It was foresight. It was love for the family name. She turned her gaze to Stanley again. He had not said a word since the revelation began. His shoulders were slumped now, his head bowed, his silence louder than any confession. That silence hurt more than anger would have. It confirmed everything. Her thoughts spiraled. She remembered nights she had cried quietly in the bathroom after her monthly cycles returned, the disappointment she swallowed so he would not feel pressured. She remembered doctor visits, supplements, prayers whispered into pillows. And all the while, decisions had been made. Elsewhere. Without her consent. Without her dignity. The elders shifted in their seats, watching her closely. They mistook her stillness for weakness. They believed she was absorbing the blow, preparing to plead. They were wrong. It was the uncle again who broke the silence. He leaned forward slightly, resting his palms on his knees, his voice measured but firm. He asked Elelliana if she had anything to say. The question was not kind. It was ceremonial. The kind of question asked when a verdict had already been reached. They expected her to speak from a place of hurt, to ask for mercy, to negotiate her worth within a structure that had already diminished her. Elelliana lifted her head. Her eyes were dry. Her face is calm. Too calm. She inhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the moment settle into her bones. When she spoke, her voice did not tremble. It surprised even her. She began by thanking them for finally being honest. The room shifted slightly at that. Gratitude was not the reaction they had anticipated. She acknowledged the effort they claimed to have made, the meetings they held, the decisions they believed were best. Then her tone changed, subtly, like a blade sliding free from its sheath. She reminded them that this marriage had not been between families alone, that she had entered it with vows, trust, and loyalty. She pointed out that betrayal did not become acceptable simply because it was dressed in tradition. That silence did not equal consent. The elders exchanged uneasy glances. For the first time since they arrived, Stanley looked up. His eyes met hers, and in them she saw something close to fear. Not fear of losing her, but fear of exposure. Fear that the version of her he thought he knew was slipping beyond his control. Elelliana turned fully toward him then, not angrily, but with a clarity that stripped away pretense. She spoke of nights she had waited for him, believing his late returns were work-related. Of the trust she had extended without suspicion. Of the home she had built with him, brick by emotional brick, believing it was shared. Then she faced the elders again and stated plainly that they had known. All of them. They had watched him betray her and had chosen to reward it. To formalize it. To place the burden of acceptance on her shoulders as though it were her duty to absorb pain quietly. The room grew tense. This was no longer going according to plan. Elelliana paused, allowing the silence to stretch. She could feel every eye in the room fixed on her now. The balance of power had shifted, and everyone sensed it. She told them there was something she needed to share as well, since truth had finally become the currency of the evening. Stanley straightened in his seat. She spoke of 3 weeks earlier, of the sickness that had crept into her body without warning. Of the hospital visits she had attended alone. Of the tests, the waiting rooms, the antiseptic smells that still lingered in her memory. She told them what the doctors had confirmed. She was pregnant. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Her mother-in-law gasped sharply, clutching the arm of her chair. Her father-in-law's walking stick slipped from his grasp and clattered against the marble floor. A chorus of shocked murmurs rippled through the room like a sudden wind. Stanley sprang to his feet, disbelief etched across his face. He stared at her as though seeing her for the first time, his mouth opening and closing without sound. Elelliana did not flinch. She explained that while they had been busy arranging a new wife for her husband, she had been lying in a hospital bed, weak and alone, carrying the very thing they claimed she could not give them. The irony was sharp, deliberate. She wanted them to feel it. She did not raise her voice. She did not accuse. She simply stated facts, one after another, allowing them to land where they may. If mistakes were to be accepted, she continued, then hers must be accepted too. If endurance was expected of her, then respect should have been extended first. The elders sat stunned. This outcome had never crossed their minds. Stanley moved toward her instinctively, reaching out as though to steady her, to reclaim some semblance of control. He asked why she had not told him. His voice cracked, desperation seeping through. Elelliana stepped back. She told him that she had been waiting for honesty, that she had been waiting for him to be her husband before asking her to be his wife again. Her words were not loud, but they carried through the room with brutal precision. She told him she felt insulted by the question. That secrecy had become his language, and she had simply learned to speak it too. The elders attempted to intervene then. Voices overlapped. Some urged calm. Others spoke of reconciliation, of adjusting arrangements. Suggestions were made, clumsy and late, about how both women could coexist peacefully now that the truth was out. Elelliana listened, then shook her head slowly. She told them that a home built on deception could never be peaceful. That love divided by force was not love at all. She stated clearly that she would not stay in a place where her worth was debated like a bargaining chip. Her voice was steady, her posture upright. She looked nothing like the broken woman they had anticipated. She picked up her handbag. The sound of the clasp echoed through the room like a final punctuation mark. Elelliana stood. Every movement she made felt deliberate, almost ceremonial. She faced the elders one last time, acknowledging their authority without submitting to it. She told them that if they needed a caretaker for the child they intended to bring into her marriage, they should proceed as planned. But she would not remain in a home where she had to compete for dignity. She told Stanley that if he wished to be a husband to 2 wives, then he would learn to be a father to her child from a distance. The room erupted in protests then. Her name was called. Hands reached out. Promises were offered too late. But she was already walking toward the door. Each step felt lighter than the last. As she crossed the threshold of the house, the evening air hit her skin, cool and liberating. She did not look back. She did not need to. Whatever version of herself had entered that compound earlier had been left behind in that room. The gate closed behind her with a soft metallic click. Inside, the Stanley family sat in stunned silence, surrounded by the ruins of a plan that had never accounted for a woman who knew her worth. And outside, under the darkening Lagos sky, Elelliana Stanley walked away with her head held high, carrying not just a child, but her freedom. The apartment Elelliana found was nothing like the house she had left behind. It was smaller, tucked away on a quiet street not far from her school, with cream-painted walls and wide windows that let in morning light. There was no chandelier, no echoing hallway, no reminders of family expectations pressing down from every corner. It was simple, clean, quiet. That quiet frightened her at first. On the first night, she lay on the bed staring at the ceiling fan as it rotated slowly above her. No footsteps outside the door. No phone vibrating with messages from relatives pretending to care. No questions about dinner or complaints about traffic. Just her breathing, steady and real. She unpacked slowly over the next few days, folding her clothes with care, arranging her books on a narrow shelf by the window. Each item placed felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. She blocked numbers methodically, without anger. Her husbands, his parents, aunties, uncles. Anyone whose voice would pull her back into a cycle of justification and guilt. Work became her anchor. She arrived early, left late, immersing herself in tasks that reminded her she was competent, capable, needed. She enrolled fully into her online courses again, attending lectures with a focus she had not felt in years. At night, she cooked. Simple meals, nourishing herself with intention. She registered for antenatal care quietly, choosing a clinic where no one knew her story. The nurses spoke to her gently, with no assumptions. For the first time in months, she felt seen without being judged. Her body responded to the peace. The sickness eased. Her sleep deepened. Her reflection in the mirror changed subtly. Her eyes were clearer. Her shoulders are less tense. Healing did not announce itself loudly. It crept in, disguised as routine. Back at the Stanley household, order unraveled faster than anyone anticipated. Angel arrived with expectations that clashed violently with reality. She was young, sharp-tongued, and unapologetic. The sickly image they had painted of her quickly faded. She refused early morning chores, dismissed the elders' instructions, and demanded comforts the household was not prepared to provide. She argued openly with Stanley's mother, her voice ringing through the house without restraint. She complained about money constantly, mocking Stanley's income and comparing him to men she claimed were doing better. The child cried often, unattended, while she locked herself in the room scrolling through her phone. The family began to whisper. This was not the submissive solution they had envisioned. This was chaos. Stanley came home later and later, avoiding the tension inside. His once ordered life had collapsed into noise and regret. The house that had rejected Elelliana's calm now craved it desperately. They began calling. At first, it was subtle. Missed calls. Unanswered messages. Then it became persistent. His mother's voice cracked during one call, speaking of family unity, of forgiveness, of how things were not going as planned. Elelliana listened to none of it. She had learned the cost of answering too soon. Stanley found her address eventually. He stood outside her gate one evening, looking smaller than she remembered. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes hollow. The confidence he once wore, like armor, had eroded under the weight of consequences. Neighbors watched discreetly from behind curtains as he pleaded, his voice carrying desperation instead of authority. He spoke of mistakes, of pressure from his family, of love rediscovered too late. Elelliana listened from inside, her hand resting on her belly. When she finally stepped outside, she did not invite him in. She did not raise her voice. She looked at him steadily and told him he had chosen his priorities long ago, that she was no longer available to fix choices she did not make. She reminded him that love without respect was noise, that marriage without honesty was theater. He reached for her hand. She stepped back. She told him to live with what he had defended. Then she went back inside and locked the gate. That night, she slept deeply. The labor was long but controlled. Elelliana focused on her breathing, on the steady encouragement of the midwife, on the knowledge that she had brought herself this far. When the baby's cry finally filled the room, it did not sound fragile. It sounded determined. A girl. Perfect. Healthy. Alive. Elelliana held her close, tears slipping silently down her temples. Not tears of grief, but of release. She had crossed something sacred alone and emerged whole. Later, when the room was quiet again, she picked up her phone. She typed one message. Just one. She informed Stanley off the birth. She mentioned the resemblance, casually, knowing it would land where words could not. She sent it without hesitation. The response came quickly. Missed calls. Messages layered with regret and longing. She did not reply. Some messages were meant to be final. A year passed. Elelliana's life expanded gently. Her career advanced. Her studies progressed. Her laughter returned, unforced and genuine. She dressed with intention now, not to impress, but to express. Those who met her sensed a quiet authority about her, a grounded confidence that did not seek validation. The Stanley family spoke of her often, not with anger, with awe. They did not say she left. They said she survived. They said she changed everything by refusing to beg, by refusing to bend, by choosing peace over pride. Stanley watched from a distance, learning too late that loyalty was not replaceable, and dignity once lost could not be negotiated back. Elelliana did not look back. She had not risen out of rage. She had risen out of self-respect. And that, more than anything else, was the sweetest revenge. What would you have done in her place? Drop your thoughts in the comments, like this video.